are these people?
Blurred labels. You're wondering why I have this photo of Robin Thicke's famous song, Blurred Lines. And it's because I'm going to have to blur a lot of this article, but as well as it's the labels are being blurred here. So we're going to get into those labels, particularly these ones that I have blurred. This is one, you know, you might, it rhymes with hummus. You know, that
Not
one.
really bad.
Close enough. The Ham,
Close enough.
right, is a terror organization. So is the Israeli government. And we're going to get into that. So first I wanted to bring the definition. This is by Norman Solomon over at antiwar.com. Great stuff from those guys. You may not like all their positions, but they do well for the most part. So, but I pulled this directly from the Oxford, right off the Google. So, terrorist, right? A person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. Okay? That's one definition here, right? Unlawfully using violence and intimidation, especially against civilians. Okay? Just keep that in your head of what that means. This is from Wikipedia. Terrorism, in its broadest sense, is the use of intentional violence and fear to achieve political or ideological aims. The term is used in this regard primarily to refer to intentional violence during peacetime or in the context of war against non-combatants. Okay? So, very important things to make distinctions of. So, Norman writes, labels are bad. I mean, central to the politics of media. And no label has been more powerful than terrorist. A simple standard of language should accompany a consistent standard of human rights which the world desperately needs. If thought corrupts language, Orwell wrote, language can also corrupt thought. Who's read their 1984? Raise your hands. So terrible ending on that book. He really should have rewrote it. Gave some hope. Would have been nice. So language can also corrupt. Yeah, you're like, it kind of needs the shitty ending.
Yes.
Yep. A bad usage can be spread
like
by
anime.
Right. A bad usage can spread by tradition and imitation, even among people who should and do know better. Okay. No amount of rhetoric from its defenders and apologists can change the reality that Hamas engaged in mass murder. What Hamas horrifically did to more than 1,000 Israeli civilians of all ages 2 weeks ago meets the dictionary definition of terrorism. Now, I will admit that Hamas denies the targeting of civilians and that they were caught in crossfire. First off, I want to state that because that is part of this story. Take that what you will. And no amount of rhetoric can change the reality, this is the big but here that Norman's getting to, that the Israeli government has engaged in mass murder during the last 2 weeks and a long time before that, Norman. Yeah. What Israel's military is horrifically doing in Gaza, already killing several thousand Palestinian civilians of all ages, also meets the definition of terrorism. No? Remember that definition we read a minute ago? The U.S. media outlets dodge being even-handed with the terrorist label, applying it to organized Palestinian killers of Israelis and not to organized Israeli killers of Palestinians. The routine media bias does not in any way mitigate the horrendous crimes committed by Hamas in Israel, and that media bias does not in any way mitigate the horrendous crimes that are being committed on an even larger scale, increasing daily, by the Israeli government in Gaza. So,
with our money.
Friend of the So Spookies is spooky. Israel is a terrorist state, she puts. I've seen this photo pushed around quite a few times, and we're going to go into why that might be the case. Let's look at this. Look at this flag I had to blur. Everyone knows this one. So this is the Nazios. Those guys. They were founded on what, Collin? Aryan supremacy, correct? Well, let's look at Israel. Look at their Jewish supremacy. Look at that. Look at that. Expelled millions from their homes. Expelled millions from their homes. Put racial groups in ghettos and camps. Put racial groups in ghettos and camps. Use dehumanizing language for undesirables. Use dehumanizing language for undesirables. I think we start to get...
You know who did it again today? Like, he called, like, children of light...
Children of light and darkness,
images.
which is straight out of SS handbooks, straight from their handbooks. They use the exact same language. Exact same language. So, Norman continues, by any consistent standard, if referring to Hamas as a Talmud organization, then the same description fits the Israeli government. But such balanced candor is absolutely intolerable in the mainstream media and the politics of the United States. It would be too honest, too real. Terrorists and their defenders always have excuses when tactics include ruthlessly killing civilians, but we're choking on a nonstop supply of smoke-blowing rhetoric, what Orwell called political language, designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. Sounds like some manufacturing consent there, does it not? Some have contended that the word terrorist should be excluded from news accounts because it can be subjective. Okay, we're going to go back, Collin. We're going to have to go back to the memory banks here. So, although ignored or derived soon after 9/11, you remember 9/11, right?
9/11 was bad.
It was bad. So, this is Reuters, okay? News service explained its policy this way. Throughout this difficult time, we've strictly adhered to our 150-year-old tradition of factual, unbiased reporting and upheld our long-standing policy against the use of emotive terms, including the words terrorist or freedom fighter. We do not characterize the subjects of news stories, but instead report their actions, identity, or background. Okay? Does that make sense to you, Care Bear? You get what Reuters was saying back then? In regards to the Iraq war, they're saying we're not going to use terrorist or whatever. They must have lost this rule, right? They must have forgot about this. So, you know who didn't forget about this? George Carlin. We're going to go to church. People need to, every once in a while, listen to the sermons of George. I think this is book 9, chapter 3, for those who have their book of Carlin in their pew.
As simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. As simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. Or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie and engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight?
What do freedom fighters fight, Care Bear?
I have no idea.
Right? So, little bit of Carlin this evening. So, I mean, he's not wrong. Israeli murderers are called commandos, and Arab murderers are called terrorists, as we are known to call them now. So let's not forget we've just been involved in another war in Europe, and we've been sending a lot of propaganda about that there, right? Look at that. That's a Ukrainian hero, Care Bear. Right? You know, they're teaching their children to just be violent, no? But that Palestinian with a rock is just real bad, right? Just super terrorist. So yeah. The media stance is an outlier. We seem to be struck with the terrorist word. Ending the routinely slanted selective use of the T word would be a real improvement. More realistically, we should resign and reject its flagrant skewed usage. It functions in sync with an array of tilted reporting patterns. Since the latest Israeli assault on Gaza began, U.S. news outlets have consistently used euphemistic words like strike, hammer, pressure, and retaliate to blur the real meaning of what it has meant to human beings when a very densely populated area is attacked with thousands of large bombs. Vivid reporting has occurred at times, but the overwhelming bulk of coverage of the Israeli government's wide-ranging terrorism has been abstracted in ways that coverage of the Hamas terrorism has not been. One factor that makes the blurring easier: the Hamas atrocities were mostly up close, with the murderers and murderer often facing each other, whereas the Israeli atrocities have been committed from high in the air, as if above it all. While in international media, outlets like Al Jazeera English and the US-based program Democracy Now!, Al Jazeera, by the way, now banned from Israel. So keep that in mind. Have consistently provided extraordinary, high-quality, heart-rendering reportage about the carnage and terror in Gaza, as well as in Israel. Such humanely equitable reporting has been extremely rare in mainland U.S. media outlets. Americans have been acculturated to assume, consciously or not, that killing people with high-tech weaponry from the air is a civilized way to go about the business of war. If the U.S. or its allies are doing it in sharp contrast to low-tech efforts of adversaries, this is an outlook from a privileged vantage point far from those on the receiving end of sophisticated firepower coming from or backed by the U.S. government. Overall, given the extreme pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian spin of U.S. mass media, even-handed use of the terrorist label is highly unlikely, but we should strive to challenge the biases at work and the deadly consequences. Norman Solomon, National Director of RootsAction.org and Executive Director of the Institute for Public Accuracy. He's the author of many books, include War Made Easy. His latest book, War Made Invisible: How America Hides the Human Toll of Its Military Machine, was published in summer 2023. Links to all that stuff in the article in the description below. So, before we move on, Care Bear, any thoughts?
I mean, you kind of talked about this last week in regards to, I'm not going to say the word, but it starts with a C.
Oh, yes.
Ends in Asian.
Yes.
The idea of you can't the one group in this case.
You cannot put condoms on them. Do not put a condom on them. So yeah, also the ceasefire word being thrown around a lot.
Oh, you know what? Can I get you're gonna talk about that now, right?
I mean, I was just gonna touch on it, but it's the fact of me and you have talked about it multiple times, that it states that there's both sides to that problem.
Well, you know what? I'm going to talk about it right now.
Please.
Because no one, but I think it just shows how no one is thinking and just kind of accepting the propaganda that there is regarding oh, we need a ceasefire, and just having this repetitive, to the point now, normies are saying, oh, we need a both, even those who are pro-Palestine are kind of calling for oh, we need a ceasefire because but let's break down what a ceasefire is, right? So if ceasefire, basically, it's when you're telling, at minimum, two political powers. Now, even with that, is an issue, because what kind of political standing do Palestinians have in terms of sovereignty? Absolutely none. So, but let's for this example, we'll give them sovereign power. So Israel and Palestine are equal, in this case. And so the idea of a ceasefire is that you stop your conflict and then negotiate over whatever items or things that the opposing parties want to have, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically trying to compromise on, we'll stop if I get this in exchange for this, and vice versa, right? So that's the idea of a ceasefire, correct? Essentially. So given that example in terms of, two powers bartering over, could be resources, it could be, whatever it is, as a bargaining chip that the other party desires to have, right?
Yeah.
What can Israel offer as a bargaining chip to Palestinians?
Other than to not kill them. That's the bargaining chip.
Which you shouldn't be doing anyway. But it's like...
So then what will Palestinians have to give up in this supposed ceasefire for,
Right.
more of their land?
That's exactly my point. What are you asking Palestinians to give up?
Yeah.
They don't have any. So essentially, other than what is left of their home.
This stems from...
And even if you do that, what are you going to do with those displaced Palestinians? Where are they going to go?
Well, and this stems from this supposed idea that it's, and this is more framing, right? That it's Israel versus Hamas, right? Like that's the thing, right? That it's only these two, right? That's who's fighting each other, right? Even though we know who made them, we knew who made Hamas, right? But I have this thread from Fiorella, friend of the show. And she writes a thread with detailed guides of different factions within the Palestinian resistance, which contain more than Hamas. In fact, even within Hamas and other factions, there are different groups and brigades. Israel isn't going after terrorists. They're killing Palestinians. So, I'm not going to read all of these, but you're welcome to pause on each one and, read some stuff if you want to. But we'll read a couple. So this is the Martyr Eaz Eldin Al-Qassam brigades, right? Who are they? The military wing of the Hamas movement, founded in 1991 following the Hamas Foundation. It consists of over 40,000 fighters of various units, including fighting brigades, special forces, cyber units, air defense units, naval fighting units, and intelligence. There's some notable figures here where they're most active. Right, and their arsenal: anti-aircraft weaponry, mortars, advanced missiles that can reach 250 kilometers, air and naval drones, anti-tank guided missiles, small arms, and advanced explosive devices. Okay, we have the Sarai al-Quids. They're the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the PIJ, founded in 1981 as the Sword of Islam Brigades. The group has maintained a continuous relationship with the axis of resistance, leveraging these to wage resistance for both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Here's where they're the most active and the notable figures. And their arsenal as well. Long and short-range rockets, mortars, explosive devices, drones, IEDs, and small arms. So these are guerrilla guys, all of them, for the most part, from what it looks like. The Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades and the Lion's Den. The military wing of Fatah, right? That's what Hamas was made to combat these guys, essentially. Established during the Second Intifada, although the group is often referred to as the military wing of the Fatah, it operates independently of Fatah's central leadership, correct? So, here's where they're the most active. Here's their notable figures and their arsenals: IEDs, RPGs, and small arms, short-range rockets, and mortars. Okay? So nothing like cluster bombs, right? We go to the Lion's Den, a politically unaffiliated resistance group officially announced in late 2022, but was active for months prior. It consists of resistance fighters of various factions who decided to fight by any means necessary under one banner. Okay? Right? They have a spokesman. They have where they're the most active, right? They've got a Telegram page. Arsenal, small arms, and IEDs, right? So we got a couple more here. We have the Martyr Abu Ale Mustafa Brigades, right? The armed wing of the Marxist Polar Front of the Liberation of Palestine, formerly the Red Eagle Group. They reorganized under their current name after the assassination of PFLP General Secretary Martyr Abu Ali Mustafa, right? They have their little arsenals, small arms, explosive devices, that kind of stuff. And they're notable figures and where they're the most active. And then we have the Al-Nasser Salah al-Din brigades, the military wing of the Popular Resistance Committees, the PRC, founded in 2000 by ex-Fatah fighter Jamal Abu Samhadana in response to the Second Intifada, again, right, among the closest factions to Hezbollah and Iran. Martyr Jamal Abu Samhadana, right? We covered that in their little arsenal. RPGs, mortars, homemade rockets, small arms, same thing as everyone else pretty much. Pretty much whatever they can get their hands on. And I think this is the last two. Yeah. So we've got the Night Confusion and Night Riot units. Night Confusion or Night Riot units are organized groups of Palestinian youth that operate across the occupied lands. Through their methods, Molotovs, incendiary balloons, and homemade explosives have long been employed. They rose to prominence following the 2018 Great March of Return and 2021 campaign to defend Baita from a Zionist settler outpost. Their goals are to damage settler property and to disturb their lives. They are not affiliated with a particular faction. Okay. And we have the Joint Operations Room, right? The Joint Operations Room of the Palestinian Resistance is a joint military operation room that includes the military arms of the major Palestinian resistance factions across Palestine. It was introduced in 2006 by Hamas and PIJ to unite their military factions during battles with the IOF. Okay? So they have a bit bigger arsenal because it's a lot of them, right? They have some anti-aircraft stuff. That's about as much as they get. That's like the best weaponry they got out of any of these groups is anti-aircraft weaponry. So, like, right. That's it. So
yeah, and just to add what I was saying in terms of the ceasefire narrative that we're hearing a lot right now, is like you asking Israel to stop, but we're continuing to fund them in terms of military defense.
Yep.
So are we going to pull our funding in the means for them to cease fire against Palestine? So that's what no one is talking about. Our politicians are sure as hell not going to say anything about that. But we're calling. So this just seems to
someone
be more like
who's talked about it. Let me pull this up. This guy, Huey P. Newton. Israel was created by Western imperialism and is maintained by Western firepower. That's what you're alluding to. Pretty much that without us, Israel doesn't exist. Joe Biden's the one who said without Israel, we would have to invent an Israel. So,
Which, again, and I tweeted this out maybe a couple of weeks ago now, but the idea, like, initially, like, East Africa was considered to be Israel because according to the people at the time, it was uninhabited.
Right.
Meaning uninhabited by white people.
Right. Now, I know Russia also offered land. I think there is land still available. If I'm not mistaken. I think China did as well, if I'm not mistaken. Someone in the chat will correct me, but pretty sure that those places actually still exist. So, because I think some of them took the offer. You know what I mean? So, after World War II, like, Russia was also involved in refugees and whatever. So, that could also be an option. I say Nebraska seems pretty uninhabited. We can give them that. Like, let them figure it out. But yeah, I mean, half of them, they are probably from Nebraska now. So it seems like a ton of American Jewish immigrants are there. So, but anyway, I just wanted to talk about that and how labels are bad, because they are. But words are important. Try to get them as correct as possible. Semantics do matter in some degrees. So, yeah. But anyway,